Good evening to you, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your hurricane outlook and discussion for Sunday, August 16th, 2015. I wanted to jump in here and talk a little bit about what's going on in the Atlantic. Lots of chatter out there in the hurricane blogosphere, if you will, about this newly designated 96L way out here in the extreme eastern Atlantic to the southwest of the Cape Verde Islands. 50% chance of development over the next couple of days. 60% chance over the next 5 days, and you can see that here represented on the 5-day map. Look at it by itself here, and this is the potential track area as it does try to develop over the open Atlantic out here, where conditions, especially in this area, this area, not too unfavorable is a way to put it. A little bit more favorable than we have seen in the recent weeks for sure. But as I'm going to show you, once you get west of there into this region, it's a whole different story. First of all, a really neat satellite shot of our system here. Zoom in on it for you. It really looks curled up already. You can clearly see that shape that you look for with a developing low pressure system, decent outflow with it. But you can also see, even on this particular satellite shot, this kind of milky color through here. And I'm going to show you what that represents in just a minute. This would be like a negative. I'll just tell you that. Most of you probably already know that is a negative for development, and I'll explain it a little bit more in a moment. But one of the positives for development is the sea surface temperature profile. This is the upper ocean heat content map from the NOAA AOML, or the Atlantic Oceanographic and Meteorological Lab out of Miami. Key Biscayne, I think to be specific, or Virginia Key. And what it's showing is the actual upper ocean heat content rather than sea surface temperature itself. So this tells me how much energy is in the water. And the best way to look at it is basically right here. This line all through here shows me that we have decent upper ocean heat content anywhere south of that red line, and our disturbance is located right in here, and it's at the low end of the scale, mind you, but it is fairly decent ocean heat content. In other words, the ocean is not cold. It is 80 degrees or higher, but that water is deeper. The 80-degree line goes deeper than just the skin of the ocean. And so this whole region through here that the tropical system 96L will be traveling through, this is a plus check mark, okay? This is a positive for development, sort of in the pro column, if you will. And so that's got that going for it. But, as we'll look at in a minute, there's a couple of things going against it. That being said, the models, this is a great site here that I like to use from the NCAR, National Center for Atmospheric Research. Shows us the suite of models that are most reliable over time, generally speaking, and you get the idea that the envelope for development somewhere like this over the next several days, if this were to get going. Right now it's just a low-level area of investigation. That's why they call it low invest. And then the AL96 is for Atlantic, and it gets a number 90 through 99 when they're just in their infancy like this, and then they start over with 90 once we get all the way to 99, which we probably will this year. I think it's going to be a little bit active over the next few weeks. Not going to have 15 named storms or anything, but I think this is the beginning, this system here, of somewhat of an active period coming up through the next probably 45 days or so. So this is the track. This is the GFS ensembles. Basically you have 20 members of the ensemble group, very much like a wind ensemble or a brass ensemble, where together they all add up to, in that case, beautiful music. Separately, they are okay on their own, but together you literally get that ensemble sound, and the same thing kind of holds true with ensemble forecasting. One model, the AVN operational, which is basically the GFS operational, on its own is good, but if you can look at the other different runs of the GFS with slightly different variables, they give you different outputs. you start developing sort of a pattern, and you get to see what's going on. And it just really helps when you have an ensemble group of forecasts. And in this case, not all 20 members of the ensemble carry the storm past just a couple of days. So you have a lot of them that die off here, but then several of them do carry it and bring it over to the west-northwest, somewhere in a position to the northeast of the Caribbean Sea in about 5 days or so, going out even to day 10. So it's going to be a slow mover, which is interesting because normally you would expect these tropical waves out here to be moving westward at 15 to 20 miles per hour. But, I mean, look, this is 240 hours out. That's 240. There's another 240. That's 216, and it gets dropped. It's kind of slow moving, which tells me that the big old high pressure system out in the Atlantic isn't as strong, and that has a whole bunch of other implications too. So we're going to be watching this for a while. The intensity is interesting early on with our system here. Some of the statistical models, very enthusiastic, bringing this up to Category 3 hurricane. Just up and up and up and up and up it goes. Whereas the dynamic, more robust computer models, if you will, some of them just kill it off. And the GFS global model, not enthusiastic at all. And some of the other models kind of in between. Right now, since it's in its formative stages, this doesn't matter too much. It's way out in the middle of nowhere. I think it'll develop and last for a couple of days. Maybe we'll see. One of the things, as I said, alluded to earlier, going against it, well, we have the warm sea surface temperatures underneath all of this region through here. That's not a problem. But remember in that satellite shot right there that I showed you this milky color here? Well, that is amazing in the fact that it shows up in this satellite picture as what we call Saharan air. The Saharan air layer blowing off of Africa with strong easterly winds coming out of the east, blowing towards the west in the mid-levels of the atmosphere, and it kicks up these large, enormous, almost continental-size areas of warm, dry, particulate-laden air, what we call the Saharan air layer. And you can see that this is rolling off in tandem with our system here. And as this tries to develop and breathe in, if you will, that convective engine starts to get going, it starts pulling air in from all around it in a counterclockwise fashion. And while to the south here, that's a lot of more moist air, to the north, it's going to start tapping into this dry Saharan air, and that may try to stifle it a little bit. So either this has to just get on out of here and roll out of the picture as this moves fairly slow, or our system here needs to stay on a fairly low latitude and kind of avoid all of this going by. And I think that it will have a decent chance and may very well become a named system, but then farther to the west, what we call the shredder is waiting for it. Now let me show you what's what. This is a convoluted map if I don't show you your geographic features first. It can be anyway. This is Cape Cod, Long Island, okay, this is the Carolinas. Starting to see everything into focus now. There's Florida, and you go around the Gulf of Mexico, etc., Central America, and then here is the northern coast of South America, and this is Puerto Rico, and here the Lesser Antilles, Cuba, so forth and so on. So let me leave that up. And now what we're looking at is the wind shear. And folks, I'm telling you, watch this. So here's your wind vector going this way, and then down into a sharp trough, what we call a tropical upper tropospheric trough, or TUT. And I'm going to add some arrows on here, kind of indicating the direction, generally speaking, enhancing what's already here. And that's bad news for tropical cyclones, because it is coming this way, straight into this wall of westerly wind. And look at some of these numbers, 20 knots, 40 knots here in the Caribbean. That is not conducive for anything to survive. You could drive a 190-mile-an-hour hurricane due west into this shear machine, and it'll eat it alive because it's literally going across the top of the system and it'll shred it apart. So all of this can change. Now, this isn't necessarily permanent, but in an El Nino year like we're seeing this year, sometimes this tropical upper tropospheric trough, this very strong upper level area of low pressure that creates this westerly wind pattern, is pretty much semi-permanent. Once in a while it'll lift out and sort of shorten its wavelength a little bit, and that allows for the high pressure umbrella to move in a little better. We'll see. I think this will be a short-lived named system. If so, it'll be Danny. But it is indicating that the tropics are trying to develop in the face of quite a hostile deep tropical Atlantic. And looking at the models out into the future beyond 10 days, more and more of these systems try to come off. And you have to think that eventually, especially as we get into September, one or two of them could survive long enough as the base state and the background of conditions just gradually gets even a little bit more favorable, that something may survive long enough to get through and eventually impact land. Hopefully, 96L can bring some much needed rain as a tropical wave or a depression at the most in terms of impact. Really need the rain in the Caribbean for sure. Puerto Rico is in a very dire drought situation. A little bit of rain there today associated with a disturbance near the region, but maybe 96L can bring some rain, even if it's a dying tropical storm. We'll see. Anyway, I think it'll develop slowly and maybe our next named storm. But as far as overall worries about it in the United States and elsewhere, I see no reason to worry about it right now. But it's so early that it wouldn't even matter if any of the computer models showed it making it all the way over to Western interests intact. There's just a lot of time to watch, and we know how things can change. All right? Well, that's it for today. I'll have a lot more, including an in-depth look at the El Nino sea surface temperature anomalies, the typical tour around the tropical, all the interest going around globally. We have some typhoons in the Pacific. I'll cover that and more in tomorrow's update, and quite in-depth. So make sure you check that out tomorrow. All right, again, I'm Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks for tuning in this early evening on Sunday the 16th of August. Have a good rest of your Sunday evening, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow.